Our conversation now is on the push to regulate TikTok in Kenya. We talked about this earlier. It's also in your dailies. And we're speaking to Mutemi. She is a tech, labor, and digital rights lawyer, and a fixer who's been here before. Good morning, Mercy.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
As always, it's nice to have you.
Yeah.
As you know the drill, before anything else, Jano will share the quote of the day with you.
She was like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Came
And you can see if it speaks to
Came
you.
prepared.
Okay. All right.
Yes, so the late Reverend Jesse Jackson once said, we must not measure greatness from the mansion down, but from the manger up.
Yeah, that for me hits. And I think about this whole idea that we are valuable because we are people. End of. It's not what we've built. It's not what we've succeeded in doing. It's that we exist.
Wow.
And that means we are people worth protecting. Yeah. Yay.
I love the different ways in which it's been perceived today.
Right.
And
Yes.
that one's because there's another one he said where don't see me as a paycheck,
Yes.
see me as a person.
Ooh,
So it
I love
speaks to
it. Okay. I
that
love
whole
that.
thing of I'm a person.
Yes.
Before
End of.
I'm
Yeah.
end of.
Yeah,
Yes.
before my productivity.
Right.
Yes.
I have value beyond my productivity.
Yes.
Imagine
Yeah.
that.
If I stop being productive, I'm still a person.
Imagine.
Of value.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, there's some people that message should land.
Polisi ndio. Some people you know,
Some people I know.
do they know themselves?
Hint, hint.
Wanajijua.
Wink.
Kama unajijua inua mkono. So yesterday in Parliament, there was some interesting conversation happening in the afternoon, and we're going to be able to hopefully play a bit of what was happening in Parliament yesterday, where it was considering a report of the Petitions Committee following a petition seeking to regulate TikTok in Kenya. It was introduced in the National Assembly by a citizen by the name Bob Ndolo. It was committed to the Committee on Petitions. The committee considered it, and they were presenting that report to Parliament yesterday. Basically, the long and short of this is Mr. Ndolo had initially gone to Parliament saying, I'd like us to ban TikTok. And the wording was, let's ban TikTok. And it was committed to the committee. The committee called other stakeholders, the Ministry of ICT, Ministry of Interior, Content Creators and Bloggers Association, Kenya Film Classification Board, the Communications Authority, the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, LSK, NCIC, National Commission on Human Rights, and the management of TikTok. When Bob came in, he said, actually, no, I'd like to amend, not necessarily ban TikTok, but let's find ways of regulating TikTok. The report was now presented before Parliament yesterday. It's what we want to discuss today, the regulation of TikTok, the thinking behind it. And our guest, Mutemi, of course, because she's been in this particular space, digital rights, he will walk us through this.
Okay.
You have interacted with the petition.
Yes.
You've interacted with the committee.
Yes.
And you've interacted with the report.
Yes.
Okay. So, the petition.
Yes.
Initially, why was he seeking to ban TikTok?
Okay.
What was his beef? Ilikuwa imemwasha. Ilikuwa imefika hapo.
Listen, he fell victim of something we are sometimes all guilty of. Remember last time we were talking about the way the internet magnifies things.
Yes.
Right? Like it drives you into panic mode.
Yeah.
Which has also happened to our parliamentarians, fake news offenses. So when something happens in the context of a digital world, the most likely immediate reaction that it triggers in people is extreme. Let's just ban this thing.
Yes.
So, for example, I imagine that perhaps he saw something very offensive, and it was during the time of the 3 a.m. lives, if you remember that period.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, hii kitu ni mbaya. There's no other way about it. This thing is bad. It's bad. It's bad. And the thing with social media that we always have to remember is that different realities can exist at the same time. Especially with TikTok. You know, we all complain about how TikTok imenisoma, and it has put me in this silo where my timeline is full of either, jokers or full of cooking material. So imagine if your timeline is full of, very harmful content over and over again. Of course, that's the reality that you're going to have.
Yes.
And it does happen a lot of the times, even with legislators and with policymakers, where the reaction is knee-jerk, that actually this thing just needs to end, this thing needs to be stopped, no matter what the benefits are. But we have to remember, we have to hold different realities with the same care. There's also people who've had very different experiences with TikTok. There's people who've had finally a chance to express themselves, who weren't getting access to telling their stories. When we see creators telling their stories in mother tongue now, that we have visibility to, we are learning culture, people are making money off it. There's many things that are happening. Simultaneously, it's also being used to abuse people.
Yes.
So these realities have to be held through the same mirror. And then now let's talk about what is the fair regulatory approach, not just knee-jerk. Yes.
It's also a very Kenyan way of approaching things, like the ban as opposed to like regulate. It's always just like, stop.
It's the cancel culture.
Yes.
It's our version of cancel culture.
Yes.
That's true. And I think about how different TikToks are for different people. And we'll talk about like algorithms and their biases. And that's also something you're very passionate about. But let's begin with Kenya's TikTok use. I know we talk about the numbers.
Yes.
Sometimes I don't think we have an understanding of just how many Kenyans are on TikTok and how much TikTok we watch. Yeah. Before we get into now the harm and the potential upside.
Okay. So let's start with transparency. So for example, TikTok just released its Q3 report on the number of posts or content that it took down for violating its community standards. And it was like just a little bit above 500,000 of posts in Q3 in Kenya. But that's not contextualized. Out of how many posts? Out of how many users? Right? So the thing with social media platforms is that we lack a clear, transparent, statistical reference point of not just how many users, but how much usage on the platforms. So if it's me and you, how many hours do we spend? What is a consumption rate? Like, they have this data, obviously, because they're tracking every movement, but there isn't as much transparency in releasing this amount of information. So we are left at the very vague area of niwengi. It's a lot of people. Or third-party statistics from people who are just observing the patterns. But what we need is actual transparency so that we understand how much money are these platforms making from an audience like Kenya. And how much, what is the demography of, the content? Is the content being shared from Kisumu? Is it from Kitale? Is it from Mukama? Like, what is the demographical division? Or for example, which area are we seeing the most harmful content from, so that then regulatory influence can step in and say, okay, if it's sexual abuse content, we need to pay attention to this region. That data doesn't exist.
Okay, that's problematic.
Yes.
So we know how many Kenyans are on TikTok, but we don't know how often they post, how much time they spend on the app, what kind of content they prefer viewing. But we know how many posts have been taken down.
Yes.
We don't know out of how many posts that were up, how many were flagged perhaps and were left.
Context. So it's like it's giving you something without giving you anything. It's
like you trying to push for that context.
100%.
Is that something that
Look, 100%. At the Oversight Lab, one of the things that we're very clear on is that transparency is what is the first step towards actually accountable regulation. You can't regulate in a vacuum. You can't say let's hold TikTok accountable, and then they'll say we just you're only 600,000 users. How do we know that? What is the data, and are you really updating it frequently? So for us, it's very important that social media platforms release information on not just their usage, but also how much money they're benefiting from. Did we see the report from the Communications Authority that now advertising has shifted to social media platforms? Like Meta is the number one platform for advertising. But how much money are they making?
So, and does that information not exist? Because I know there's a big data gap. I was going to ask if it's been withheld or it's not there altogether.
Oh, it's there.
Listen, there.
Everybody leaves a digital footprint now. Everything that you do online is tracked. So they have this information. Of course, they need it for their own strategy.
So what does it benefit them to not publish?
Because clarity and transparency leads to direct regulation. Why would they want
and
that?
Accountability.
Yes. That's the gap.
Unaona headline ya Business Daily.
Kenya 6 ID cards from Elon Musk's Starlink users.
How do we know who's using Starlink? Anyway, is there any law in this country that mandates these platforms to release, like the data that TikTok released?
Yes.
Was it on voluntary release or is it in adherence to the law?
Okay. So social media platforms and even Google search engines have their version of transparency reports. So, for example, Google will tell you how many takedown requests it received from the government. Yes. Meta will do the same. X released theirs. So it's part of their own internal structure to have some form of transparency results. Yeah. The thing is, it's not detailed information. It's not contextualized information either. So it's not enough for regulators to be able to pick up on the things that actually need to be regulated. So it's, again, there's this idea behind tech platforms to do just enough to be seen to be doing something without doing the thing that you're actually supposed to be doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's no law.
So about the legal framework, look, the Constitution is the law. And the Constitution actually has a huge preference on access to information, especially information that would be useful or important in enabling people to exercise their rights. So if you view it from that perspective, like regulation and protection of people online is a way for people to exercise their rights. So there's a framework already on access to information. And for example, if you did an access to information request to TikTok, under the Access to Information Act, they should give you that information.
Okay.
Yes.
But this is now, it's upon you requesting.
Yes.
Is there a legal framework that says this is what you, that compels you to do it?
Yes.
That says if you are being accessed in Kenya, this is what we expect you to do. Number one, you shall make sure that children are kept safe. Number two, and so on and so forth. Because Constitution is there, it's broad.
Yes.
But the reason why we have acts of parliament are to be specific to issues.
Yeah.
So it depends on the route you're taking towards the regulation conversation. So if you're taking a protection of children route, there's an inherent requirement under the Children's Act for platforms, for individuals to act in the best interest of children. And you look at that together with the provisions of the Data Protection Act and the provisions of the Access to Information Act, you read in it a requirement for regular and proactive disclosure of information, which doesn't happen. So then that's just one section of protection, which is just protection of children online. Yeah. But, scan it out and think about me and you and what affects us online. There isn't one specific regulation that says, okay, social media platforms must do the following. So it's more of, no, this is the principle in the Constitution. It hasn't been concretized. How do we effect it? So even if the Constitution, anticipates proactive disclosure of information, the fact that these companies do not proactively disclose the information means we have to enforce it. Yeah. We have to do the access to information request. We have to take them to court sometimes to get that information. But then that's not what is supposed to.
Or have laws structured in such a way that it's mandatory, for them to do it periodically to some governing body, to some oversight authority or something of the sort.
That doesn't exist. And actually, one of the recommendations from the committee was that when I was representing the Law Society of Kenya in the committee hearing on this petition, and one of the issues that really came up is, but we don't have enough information to be making this decision. So they've put in the recommendations regular reports on number of users, number of posts, number of accounts taken down. Why have they been taken down? And it has to be disaggregated data specifically to Kenya, not in the whole world. This is what we're doing.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. I know we had a bite. I don't know if we can have that and then come back and respond.
It's proceedings in Parliament yesterday where the chair of this committee on petitions, the MP for Unyenjes, Eric Mushangi Jiro, he's called Wakareba. This is what he was saying as he presented the report to Parliament.
As he said all these things, the Speaker of this House does not have a vote. The Speaker of this House does not participate in debate. The Speaker of this House does not generate debate.
Okay.
No, not we'll that one. That was a separate one. That was the speaker reacting to the MP for Kitutu Church's house and what he had said yesterday and kicking him out of party. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll come back and see if we can get just a bit of what Okaremba was saying in Parliament.
Yeah. But so what you mentioned actually about this appearance of giving information while not actually doing it, and you even mentioned like Google publishing the takedown requests. And when we covered this story, I remember one thing, we're like, we would like to get more granular data. That was exactly what we said. We're like, okay, we can. So you took down these many requests. These are how many were anchored in law. This is but it's not really concrete information. So then I'm looking through this petition and how we're going into legislating. What data is informing these recommendations?
Yes. And listen, like there's a huge danger of regulating let's call it blindly. We're going into an elections year, and we know how heightened our social media feeds get around election years. As a matter of fact, I would say the questionable laws we've found regulating the digital space, like the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, have come out of election periods. Because they're very intense periods. If you're going to see hate speech, if you're going to see disinformation, it's going to be in this period. And now we have to think about deep fakes as well, right? So there's a very high likelihood that we are going to regulate from the perspective of what we're experiencing in an election cycle, which is in characteristic of timelines consistently. And sometimes it just, what matters is who has the majority in parliament, what agenda are they trying to push for. So it doesn't amount to true tech accountability or true regulation or protection of people. It amounts to protection of individuals who want to vie for specific positions.
I want to push back on this. Okay, I hear you. But Mercy,
yes,
you participated in this entire petition process.
Yes.
The petitioner was not talking about issues around politics.
Yes.
The petitioner was saying, let's ban.
Yes.
The committee said, there's somebody here who says ban, what do you think?
Yes.
The Law Society of Kenya, represented by Mercy, said, what you're telling us, we are assuming that's part of what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely.
That there's no framework, and this is what the platforms are getting away with, and this is the danger of it.
Yes.
Others presented their findings.
Yes.
The committee has come up with a report which says, this is what we've heard from people. They do not want ban, but they are saying, let's regulate.
Yes.
And in that regulation, they're specific. It's on why, on the areas of regulation, right?
Yeah.
In which they say, access. Who accesses these platforms? How do we protect them? Age, vulnerabilities, and all.
Yes.
Right? They also say content.
Yes.
And the level of content that's in these platforms, and so on and so forth. Come up with a framework on how to regulate this, right?
Yeah.
So before we jump into, we're in the period where we'll start rage baiting.
Yes.
We are not going to be able to contribute substantively to this particular one.
Yeah.
What exactly has the committee proposed?
Yes.
In the petition, right? What's before Parliament today on record?
Okay. All right. So one thing to remember about the way parliamentary petitions work is that they hear a petition, they invite interested parties to give their perspectives, then come up with their list of recommendations on what needs to be done by different government agencies. So one of the things that is very clear from the report is that different agencies have been tasked with doing different things. So one of the key requirements is the transparency requirement, and that is tasked to the Communication Authority, ODPC as well, the Data Protection Commissioner. One thing to just note is a lot of these recommendations do die a very quiet death if they're not picked up on and if they're not effected.
First of all, answer, Mercy.
Yes.
What are the recommendations?
So that's I'm saying that to say that
stop priming
stop
priming us. Just tell us
let's
first
divide.
what's the recommendation.
Yes.
And then come now and tell us now.
Exactly.
This, please note.
Okay.
The reason I'm making that disclaimer is to categorize the recommendations. The recommendations to the government, the recommendations to the tech platforms, and the recommendations to Parliament. Okay? So to the government is around transparency, is around regulation and development of standards.
Okay.
And we've had a discussion around that.
Yeah.
And the route to enforcing those regulations is holding government agencies accountable and holding them to account to enforce those regulations. So for example, active citizens writing to Communications Authority and saying, this is what needs to be done, Parliament has recommended for this, can we engage on this issue? That is one chapter. On the platforms themselves, this is what the committee is saying. Number one, content moderation has to be done differently. One, there has to be transparency around content moderation, which means what is the transparency around your community standards, right? How are you protecting people from an objective perspective of the community standards?
Yeah.
Secondly, it's how many content moderators do you have? We discussed on why the TikTok problem of, being saturated with harmful content or the 3 a.m. lives, why that came up to be. And it was because there weren't enough content moderators.
Right.
And while we talk about, the ban and these big fixes, there is a very easy way of addressing this problem, which is upping the number of moderators. But content moderation is not just about the number of people, it's also about the algorithm optimization.
Yes.
So when you think about how we consume social media and the kind of content that is shared on these platforms, not all of it is in English. A lot of it is actually in very local languages. So one of the things that was flagged by the committee is around the language disparity issue, right? So we consume social media in different languages, Kenyan languages, but then only one is used to train the algorithm. So there should be a deliberate effort by the platforms to train their algorithm in the Kenyan languages, and that is one of the specific recommendations.
Kiswahili and Sheng and like speakable Kiswahili as well as mother tongue.
Yeah, but they've gone a step further and actually recommended all the languages. So training of the algorithm in all the Kenyan languages.
Yes.
That way, like the algorithm is able to catch a lot of the harmful stuff before we talk about content moderation.
Okay.
And then content moderation is also about mental health, because we understand content moderation to be that you're exposing workers to the worst imaginable kind of content on a daily basis and on an hourly basis. So the care structure has to be very well thought out. And we've been talking like for a while now around the human trafficking and the forced labor patterns at moderation. So how do we expect effective content moderation to take place when the workers are not being protected? So there needs to be very clear frameworks around how the content moderators are being protected. So the route to that now is holding the companies and their local agents accountable. TikTok does its content moderation in Kenya. It's being done by Majorel, which is now Teleperformance. So it's about transparency and accountability. One role is to Parliament itself, is to conduct regular, assessments, like how many content moderators, like the committee recommended for an increase in content moderators. How many are now being employed, over which languages, how many languages are you training your algorithm in, so that then we push the information, the efforts of what the recommendations are pushing forward.
What support are they receiving again from a mental health perspective?
Yes.
This is me thinking out loud and it's completely off, but I'm just, because the issue of content moderators has always like kind of bothered me, because again, anyone you expose to the worst of humanity over time, it's going to take an incredible toll on their mental health. And I think sometimes this is maybe us using technology the flip way, which is that an algo will detect that I am chopping with a knife and it'll see a knife and it'll be like bad and it'll take down my content without the context of knowing that she's cooking, right? But the algo isn't being used to just wipe off the very worst at the beginning. Is there a case for the algorithm taking the bulk and the nastiest, and content moderators dealing with the moderate of like, oh, knife, is knife bad in this situation or is knife good? Am I making sense?
You're making a lot of sense. And listen, let's start with what the companies are currently saying.
Okay.
They're saying that the bulk of the content moderation is being done already by the algorithms. But algorithms trained using which data sets? That's where the problem is. Right? So already, and let me take you a step back, we hadn't achieved universal access to the internet, which means a very limited portion of all of us is represented on data sets that are already available online to train the algorithms. Which means when you train algorithms, no matter how effective you're training them to pick out content,
they'll have bias.
Exactly. They'll have bias. They'll be optimized to a predominantly white audience and to protect people from that. So content moderation conversations actually step back to examine the data sets, ask the questions. Like if you're training your algorithms, where are you training them? Using which data sets? And how are you ensuring that they're very representative? So for us to achieve that, there has to be more deliberate effort in training algorithms in an inclusive way, so that then we can protect people. So it's a very long conversation, and one of the things I'm very grateful for that the committee took on is to think about the content moderation conversation as a continuous target to meet. Not hire 100 content moderators and that fixes the problems. It's more about regularly report on what efforts you're putting into place to improve protection of people online generally through content moderation, whether it's through an algorithm or through human content moderators.
Okay. Government recommendations, platform recommendations. The last one was to Parliament?
Yes. The last one was to Parliament, is now to legislate. So this is now where the trap is, because legislate from what perspectives? What are the agreed on principles? What are the issues? Do we have enough data to understand where the problem is before we say legislate? Because this is the reality of parliamentary processes, is that any member of parliament can come up with a bill from any perspective. Although the committee could also come up with a bill, and also the government could come up with a bill that can be moved through the lead of majority. So this for me is the anxious point when we're talking about transparency and what happens when now you tell people to legislate without data, because people legislate from their perspective and what they seek to achieve.
And it could be moved to surveillance.
That's the thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So when civil society organizations raise concerns around privacy, like it's not as straightforward as Elon Musk saying, give us your IDs because the Kenyan government is asking for that. There's a different perspective. What is the principle behind this? What are we trying to do? What is also the legal framework?
Okay.
Thank you. This is, you see,
it serves
she's helped me answer. And maybe we'll thread later.
Yeah.
You see, that thing that was bugging me when we were doing the Business Daily story. Yeah, I've started gathering like momentum 1+1ing. But go on, Eric. We'll do that one as a separate conversation.
Yeah.
So the recommendation here is develop regulatory framework through legislation.
Yes.
Okay. And then it says, tell the Communication Authority, work on legislation. Tell the Ministry of ICT, work on legislation.
Yeah.
Now, are you saying yes to legislation, but let's all participate in legislation? Or are you saying no to legislation?
Oh, okay. There has been like maybe 10 years. We're 10 years behind on the need of a regulatory framework. Let's call it a regulatory framework, whether it comes through legislation or regulations, 100%. I'm saying, yes, we do need lots and lots of regulation on this field, including even on what can your technology do. Can your technology, for example, as TikTok, carry deepfake pornography videos that have been used to harm people? Right. We've needed regulation on these issues from a long time ago.
Okay.
The gap is how we are approaching legislation and regulation. What is your proposal
as the experts in this? Have the experts in this now come up with their proposal and said, we are ready to present this to Communication Authority, to the ICT Ministry on let's come up with the legislation, regulations based on this framework? Or are we waiting for them to come up with theirs and say, now look, they don't even have data?
Okay. Now let me tell you, the reality on the ground is actually quite different from the idea of people just waiting. So I'll give the example of content moderators and algorithm training workers because it's a huge constituent of algorithm training workers in Kenya, right? So last year, the Business Laws Amendment Bill was introduced in Parliament. So it strikes me as very contradictory that, a committee is saying that let's regulate social media platforms. And the business law had a provision there that provides for immunity for the same tech platforms, that if they come to Kenya and cooperate with a local company and violate Kenyan law, then you cannot sue them for accountability. So we seem to be speaking at cross purposes. So what the workers did at that point through the Africa Tech Workers Movement is develop standards. They understand the back end of technology. And these are the proposals that they presented to the Senate committee and said, look, this is what is happening on the back end, and we can even show you how to leverage on protection of people. Okay. So like you can ask, this is the point at which you can ask questions around the data sets, for example, to make sure that the algorithms are being optimized. This is the point at which you can ask questions about content moderation to ensure people are being protected, right? What did the Senate committee do? They did not conduct any public participation. They did not involve them in the legislative process. This was a legislation that was pushed on from the executive, and workers were completely shut out of it, a very key constituent. So what I'll tell you is that there's already groups doing a lot on the ground, be it from a research perspective, be it from a lived experience perspective. And what is pending here is the humility to accept that the information lies with the people who are actually in the system. The people who are actually training the algorithms understand what is very problematic about the algorithms. You have to bring them on the table. The problem
Especially
is
in the absence of proper data.
Exactly. Because they're your primary data source. It's not that we don't actually have this information. It's that we're waiting for information from a different source. Like we're waiting for it to be university sanctioned or government sanctioned to verify it. When we were talking about the AI policy framework, for example, one of the propositions was that Kenya didn't have an AI industry. And I was like, but we train Tesla vehicles, we train Walmart self-checking, we train the world's bulk of the world's algorithms. So we do have an industry, but we're not connecting the dots. And this is where it gets complicated. The government's approach towards this conversation on tech accountability has been from a trade perspective. There's this idea around the Silicon Savannah, and what that has translated to is if we train enough of Silicon Valley's algorithms, if we make them happy, if we join the bandwagon, for example, President Trump's bandwagon on absolving them from any liability and executive orders protecting the Facebooks and the TikToks from any liability, then we're going to make progress in the digital economy and position ourselves very favorably, even for maybe foreign direct investment. That is very problematic because other things are banning as we do the bidding for these tech platforms. So is there a middle ground where we listen to the bearers of the information, people who actually have primary information, and then regulate from a point of understanding these things, and at the same time position our country competitively to participate in the digital economy.
To consider at the same time. Has anybody gotten it right? I was trying to look at countries with total or near bans and then try and get information on, like, what has it solved, you know? Some of them include, I don't know, Nepal, November 2023, but it was reversed in August of 2024. This is TikTok, by the way. They initially banned the app to prevent the disruption of, quote, social harmony. And the spread of indecent material, but it was reversed after TikTok agreed to content moderation terms, which you've spoken to. There's Somalia, there's Iran, then there's countries with government device bans. You can speak to that. The US is listed here. All 50 states and federal agencies have banned TikTok on government devices. Canada, United Kingdom, European Union, Australia, and other nations. So talk to us about what you're saying about the middle ground and about these kind of decisions and what that's done, because again, this could look like it could look like censorship, but maybe they've gotten something right here, or maybe like when Nepal reversed it, they decided now, okay, let's moderate, and how that's going. Just talk to us about some of what you've seen in other places.
It doesn't look like censorship; it is censorship, plain and simple. And listen, there's a lot, and this is the where I started the conversation is holding different realities. With
it can be problematic.
Exactly.
But the government can also be problematic.
Do you get? Yes.
So if TikTok can be a problem, so can government. At the same time.
Why is one more problematic than the other, and according to whom?
Also, why are we very fixated on one platform when X has Grok undressing people? Right? So this is not a TikTok problem, it's a social media problem across the board. And it's not, it's observing the pattern. So listen, the geopolitical context is that different countries are reacting differently depending on what the prioritization is. So for example, let's examine what's happening in the US, because it has a direct correlation to what's happening here. Their regulation right now is not being driven from a point of protecting people, it's not being driven from a point of protecting anything other than being number one in AI and deploying AI and making money through AI. That there seems to be a singular focus on that, which is why you're seeing the executive orders, which is why you're seeing preferential terms for data centers, right? So a lot of people are paying the price for that. You see also the number of lawsuits from like the addictive trials for, you know, all the social media companies are on trial in the US, which begins today, and actually Mark Zuckerberg is testifying today. So you see a lot of people paying the price for that. You see their technology being used for tech-facilitated gender-based violence, which is now being exported to other parts of the world as well. When you examine the example in Nepal, if you approach these conversations from a perspective of we cannot control the political narrative, that is the result that ends up with. It's like, let's ban it, but that's censorship. That's also you giving up on all the advantages, including representation, including cultural expression, freedom of expression, political advocacy, all these other advantages that the platforms have. You're giving up that so that you can benefit one faction. So when it comes to governance of platforms, 100% it has to be multi-stakeholder process, with one exception: understanding that some of the stakeholders on the table are more powerful than others. The platforms do not have equal power to the people. The platforms actually control what is happening. They are in control of the algorithms. They're in control, for example, over the commercialization of the platforms. And this is the thing around the eyeball discrimination. I like to call it that because that's exactly what it is. That you make money online depending on where you're located and where your viewers are located. So in the example of TikTok, and this is one of the issues actually that the committee had a recommendation on, is that you as a Kenyan audience can make Western-based audiences a lot of money by just viewing their content. The more you view their content, like, you make them a lot of money. But also Kenya is not in the monetization program. No matter how popular your content is, which has pushed people to the AI, the live model, where people now have to go on lives and get gifted with the lions, which has now created another problem because the lives are, okay, I need to be as controversial as possible to earn
as many lions.
Exactly. So it's a policy issue still at the end of the day, but we have to get together the table, recognize that governments and the tech platforms have an equal power, and then the people who need to be protected need a bigger seat at that same table. Yeah, true. That's the only way we
their lived experience.
Exactly.
I know you're cooking something. I just want to read feedback just in case we don't get to come back to it. Larson says, watching my favorite lawyer. So, yeah, special greetings to you. Jumba Pan-African, to what extent should legal age mandates be implemented to regulate social media access for minors, given the impact of algorithmic feeds on adolescent brain development? You can talk about that briefly. These are just other comments. Issues like misinformation, data privacy, and explicit content are rampant on other social media platforms in Kenya. Why is Parliament singling out TikTok, which I think Mercy alluded to? The Kikombe says, I like the idea of cultural moderation in different languages. Kuna kazi kwa lugha kadhaa, I like. Renson Kamala says, training the algorithm on Sheng won't be possible because Sheng words change every day. The Sheng data set that will be used to train the algorithm today will be obsolete tomorrow. And then there's two more comments. Lenity Steve says, is it social media as a whole or just TikTok by MPs? This will give us, or me, a conclusive opinion on the issue. And finally, the Kikombe says, that's very deep. As we tease investors with lack of accountability, other things are burning. Wow. Okay.
Oh, that's a lot of feedback. Okay. Let me just
respond to this one because there's an idea here of why TikTok.
Yes. Listen. Again, we have to remember this arose out of a parliamentary petition. So you as a citizen are entitled to petition Parliament to exercise any of its roles, which is legislative, oversight, or representative, through a parliamentary petition. And when you do, they are required to hold a hearing. Actually, it's time mandated. They never keep the timelines. But they have to hold a hearing, call other people, and then give recommendations on that. One of the things I will fault the committee for is that you had an opportunity to zoom out. So the petition came through the vehicle of TikTok, but it is also your responsibility to play a representative role and represent all the various constituents who are also on Facebook, who are also on X, where a lot of people are also going through very similar experiences, and then make recommendations across the industry, not for one platform. Let us also not forget that this is giving TikTok way too much advertising and notoriety. So this is also not a very good thing that we are hyper focused on TikTok, and we need to zoom out and focus on the other platforms. But their recommendations were restricted to what the petition was about, which is TikTok. I don't see a situation where a regulator or even Parliament or whoever carries this forward, and we as the Oversight Lab do intend to carry this forward and hold TikTok accountable on these recommendations. For example, it's not going to be hyper-focused on TikTok. These apply across the board. And any regulatory conversations around how to balance the interests has to be on not just social media platforms, just digital and online platforms across the board. We overlook Google and YouTube a lot of the times, but look at the problems there as well.
It's because we don't think of them as social media platforms.
Exactly.
Okay, just
the report actually now when it comes back, it talks about all these recommendations are on social media, including TikTok.
Exactly.
And they including TikTok because that was the entry of the petition. So it has broadened in terms of our recommendations, or you would say train AI is all social media platforms, including TikTok. Train your AI. Increase your moderators. All of you increase your moderators. And I think there's still opportunity here. This one is just telling the ministries do this and the other. But I see opportunity, and that's why I was asking on what happens. If there's opportunity here because of this conversation, then to go ahead and introduce legislation. It could be regulations. It is still subsidiary legislation. What are people like you doing to take the lead on this? Right? So then you say, these recommendations have been adopted by Parliament. Which call on the Ministry of ICT, the Communication Authority, the platforms, and all to work towards something. And now here we are taking the lead. Here is a roadmap on how we can develop this legislation. Whether you're saying, let's have meetings, let's meet so and so, or whether you're saying, we've already met them, and here's what they're saying. You can go and
100%.
validate.
So 2 points. It would have been just what I thought when you were commenting before. It would have been very interesting. The way they summoned TikTok officials would have been very interesting if they summoned Meta and X as well, who do not have any content moderation efforts here, so that we could get the full picture. That's just like a side note. Yeah. All right. So what we do at the Oversight Lab is...
Hold on. Meta doesn't have any content moderation?
They've migrated the entire content moderation efforts to Ghana as in retaliation, retaliation of the lawsuit by the content moderators.
Because you said they should pay people properly.
Exactly. And protect their mental health. It's like, yes, far be it from us to be held accountable.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, that is exactly the attitude. Anyway, so at the Oversight Lab, what we are trying to do, what we do is shaping our digital future. But we have to do this by being rooted in communities. So, for example, where we represent the workers, we are rooted in the worker community. And one of the other issues that is very core to us as far as social media is concerned is the issue of deepfakes, where we represent also a community of women who have been subjected to tech-facilitated gender-based violence. What it looks like basically is your photo on Instagram being taken and being deepfaked into pornography and then being sold on Telegram, on X, and on Facebook, on these platforms. So this is a huge mountain, and there are so many perspectives and entry points to it. So one of our entry points, for example, on deepfakes is researching. So we research what is the fundamental problem. There is always that temptation, and reflect on the Russia perpetrator example, there's always that temptation to blame the victims and to blame the single users, for example. So in the deepfakes example, we are very hyper-focused on catching the young people who are using their computers to deepfake people. And they should 100% be held accountable. But if you catch one, you give rise to 10, right? That's not the problem. The problem is that there's a developer somewhere that developed a technology that can create
a deepfake
AI enabled pornography or image-based abuse of a person. That is the gap to fill, right? So doing the research on who are these people, where are they located, and discussing with Parliament, discussing with the executive, and also, like, for example, the quasi-government entities like the Gender Board and the National Coalition for Human Rights as well, is having this multi-stakeholder discussions on things that need to happen. So that's our approach. So we focus on an issue. Content moderation has been one of our biggest issues, core issues of concern. We've done immense and extensive research about this. We have documented it, and we have given this information even to parliamentarians and to the government. So that then, as they begin the conversation, they're not beginning from the blue. But again, let me highlight the gap. We are not on the same page with our government. Our government is legislating from the point of view of, we need Meta to send more jobs. Na nyinyi mnafukuza Meta.
Finya computer upate dollars.
Exactly. So our information is landing on deaf ears, which is the gap.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when I say capitalism is the root of all evil, can I preach it?
Yes.
Let's finish. Last question, and it's something we talked about earlier. Basically, where are we with this petition, and then how do we get this into like proper legal framework without going full on fascist, which is the temptation, given that we're going into an election year, and given what we've seen with the ICT amendment.
Yes. Act. Yeah. And thank you for understanding that anxiety. It's very important that people always have that anxiety when they talk about regulation. The problem might be huge, but the solution needs a more balanced approach where we understand all the moving facts and all the moving factors. So where the stage of this petition is that, unfortunately, parliamentary petitions die when you present the committee report. So even if they've said within 30 days the Communications Authority has to do 1, 2, 3, there's nobody checking. There isn't a mechanism for somebody to follow up other than the mover of that petition himself writing and saying, I presented this petition and you need to do this. And then when it's not done, going back to Parliament and moving Parliament again for non-enforcement of its petition. So there's a gap there. What I would hope to see actually is motivation from members of Parliament, because there's these very specific calls to Parliament should. I would hope that they take that as, this is our call for us to do this. And that for me speaks to genuine efforts to regulate this space without waiting until it's, this is how I can benefit from this. Let me go and tweak legislation from this. I want to believe that that's not too much to ask, but I'm also very pragmatic about that it's too much to ask from this.
I could say, and the reason why I've been hitting on you like this is because you are a passionate player in this and you understand what's going on. Now, Mr. Bob Ndolo, out of his own volition,
Yes.
took a petition to Parliament
Yes.
that has landed us here.
Yes.
And I'm challenging the professionals such as
Yes,
yourselves.
100%.
Take a petition.
Yes.
And start this conversation. That then you start steering the conversation towards the right way to do things, instead of coming towards the tail end and say, oh, this was started, it was being led, and we are trying to get in and they're refusing to let us in. Build a table.
Yeah.
So
and
let
start
me
saying, we are
shock
coming
you.
with a table, sit.
I was going to say, is that something you're doing?
We have done it. That this is the thing. So when was that petition filed?
Tell
This
us.
one. It was filed 2023. Around the same time, we also petitioned Parliament as well. When the chat GPT story came out, we petitioned Parliament, number one, to do a mapping of all the algorithm training companies in Kenya and what data sets they're doing, so that then we can reach to a place of that accountability that we're calling for.
Right.
The thing about the parliamentary process, again, is that it is very slow. So what we have opted to do is back that up with advocacy elsewhere.
Okay.
You see, advocacy is not just towards Parliament.
Yes.
Parliament plays a representative role. We are the people.
Yep.
The reason why when you call me to this segment and we talk about these conversations on content moderation that have been very, very, I want to believe, mind shifting, is because for us, this is also part of advocacy, is getting the people to know and to care about these issues.
Yes.
We are litigating these issues because of the exact same reason. So right now we have cases in court against Meta on algorithms, and the algorithm not being up to optimize, the algorithm leading to even planning terrorist attacks on their algorithms
Yeah.
because of the lack of optimization and care.
Right.
Protecting the content moderators, challenging Parliament for not doing public participation on the immunity bill. These are things that we're constantly doing because ni mimi na wewe, we have us,
Yes.
but we also understand our role as the Oversight Lab to bring us all along on this journey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have to wrap it
Conversation
up.
1 of 15.
Right?
Yeah. But
Hey.
thank you very much, Mercy Mutemi, tech, labor, and digital rights lawyer. Thank you for staying with Fixing the Nation. Mariam Bishar, Eric Latif, Jadet Bogwa. Your World is up next on NTV and Vibe Shift on Nation FM with Brian Aseli and Claudia Naisabra. See you tomorrow.